Howdy folks, it's the 4th week of March 2026, and welcome to This Week in the West. I'm Seth Spillman, broadcasting from the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. On this podcast, we share stories of the people and events that shape the history, art, and culture of the American West, and those still shaping it today. Now, I love history and think all of our This Week in the West episodes have been interesting, but as a 3-cup-a-day coffee drinker, I'll admit I'm particularly geeked about this week's podcast. I typically have cup number 2 here with me during these recording sessions, and I imagine many of you, our faithful listeners, might be settling into your morning listening with a hot cup of coffee in hand. As we'll find out today, coffee not only fuels many of us through the day, it also helped fuel cowboys in the American West decades ago as they drove cattle across the plains. And that's in large part because of John Arbuckle, whom we remember today during the week of his death, March 27th, 1912. Before coffee was just a drive-through away, it was a fragile commodity. Roasted beans went stale quickly. Most families bought green coffee beans and roasted them in a skillet over the fire at home. One burned bean could ruin the whole batch. Consistency was rare and freshness was unreliable. John Arbuckle saw a golden opportunity in that breakfast time frustration. Born in 1838 and raised in Pittsburgh, Arbuckle entered the grocery trade with his brother Charles. One product captured his imagination: coffee. In 1868, he patented a process that coated roasted coffee beans in an egg and sugar glaze, sealing them from air and extending their shelf life. That innovation changed everything. For the first time, Americans could buy roasted coffee in 1-pound paper packages that stayed fresh. His Ariosa brand quickly spread across the country. By the 1870s and 80s, the Arbuckle brothers had moved their operations to New York and were producing coffee on an industrial scale, using machinery that filled, weighed, sealed, and labeled bags in one continuous process. It was modern food production before most Americans knew what that meant. But it wasn't city dwellers alone who made Arbuckle rich. It was the West. On the cattle trails, coffee wasn't a luxury, it was survival. Long before dawn, before the herd stirred and the wranglers saddled their horses, the chuck wagon cook already had a pot boiling. They'd hang a 5-gallon pot over the coals or nestle it into the embers. Cowboys drank coffee with breakfast. They drank it before taking night guard. They drank it after hours in the saddle. They drank it when sleep was impossible, but exhaustion could quickly turn into bad decisions. Some cowboys didn't even bother brewing coffee. Arbuckle's glazed beans were so durable that trail hands sometimes carried a pocketful and simply chewed them for a quick jolt of caffeine. One cook estimated he went through more than 100 pounds of beans a month. The men, he said, half lived on coffee. Cowboys even had a saying about how coffee ought to be made. It should be strong enough to float a horseshoe and hot enough to blister a steer's tongue. Indeed, they liked it scalding hot and black. No mocha frappuccinos out on the cattle trail. Anything weak was dismissed as belly wash or brown gargle. Some chuck wagon cooks never threw out the old grounds, simply adding new ones day after day. The coffee pot itself was never washed. Trail cooks believed years of brewing seasoned the pot, much like a cast iron skillet. Before Arbuckle, settlers sometimes drank substitutes made from rye, parched corn, or bran because good coffee was hard to find out in the frontier. But Arbuckle's glazed, packaged Ariosa could travel hundreds of miles by rail and wagon without losing freshness. Soon, on the cattle trails and in frontier towns, many cowboys simply called coffee Arbuckle. The brand name became generic. If you ordered coffee, you got Arbuckle. It later earned the nickname the coffee that won the West. Each package of Ariosa included a coupon, worth about a cent, redeemable for merchandise. Customers could save enough for aprons, pocket knives, razors, even a revolver. Arbuckle had essentially invented one of the first national rewards programs. Long before airline miles or credit card points, Americans across the frontier were saving coffee coupons for prizes. In some communities, the coupons were widely traded and even functioned like currency. Some trail crews even joked that a green hand could be hired and paid for with just a handful of Arbuckle coupons. In addition to the famous coupons, packages of Ariosa coffee often contained a small stick of candy, commonly peppermint. For many frontier customers, especially children, the candy became as memorable as the coffee itself. Some trail accounts mention cowboys dropping the peppermint stick directly into the pot or stirring it into their tin cup. Even the packaging had value. The large cloth sacks became dish towels, bandages, or aprons, and the sturdy wooden shipping crates were repurposed into furniture, toolboxes, chicken coops, and wagon boxes. But as often happens, success eventually brought competition. Out west, James A. Folger built his own coffee empire along the Pacific coast, eventually challenging Arbuckle. Folger's advertisements boasted no prizes, no coupons, nothing but satisfaction. Back east, Arbuckle expanded into sugar refining, provoking a fierce price war with sugar magnate Henry Havemeyer. The so-called sugar war cost millions and drove prices down dramatically. Coffee quality across the industry suffered as companies cut corners. Arbuckle weathered the fight, but the strain was real. When he died in 1912, the company began to decline. By the 1930s, the Arbuckle empire was sold off. In 1974, Pat and Denny Willis brought the brand back. Arbuckle Coffee Roasters now operates a 7,000 square foot facility in Tucson, Arizona. Unpaid endorsement, their Ariosa is my personal favorite. Dig into the history of the West and you'll find story after story showing just how much coffee was a lifeblood of the frontier experience. Early travelers through the desert wrote that coffee could make the difference between endurance and collapse. We hope your Arbuckle hits the spot just as much this morning or whenever you give us a listen. And with that, we've poured the last drop of another episode of This Week in the West. Our show is produced by Chase Spivey and written by Mike Kaler. Follow us and rate us on Apple Podcasts, wherever you hear us. That'll help us reach more people. Got a question or a suggestion? Drop us an email at podcast@thecowboy.org. We leave you today with a poem by legendary cowboy poet S. Omar Barker on what makes for truly good cowboy coffee. Now here's the recipe, timed and true, for Chuck Wagon Coffee, the Buckaroo's Brew. Use Arbuckles roasted in case you can get it. Pour in enough water to just sort of wet it. Boil hard for an hour, then into it toss the well-rusted shoe off a club-footed hoss. Gaze into the pot for a few minutes steady. If the hoss shoe is floating, your coffee is ready. Much obliged for listening, and remember, come find your West here at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum.